In section 6.2, we are going to be learning about a specific type of probability distribution known as the binomial probability distribution. If you recall, in 6.1, we learned about general probability distributions, so in this section, we're going to learn about a specific type called the binomial. The following are lists of the specific characteristics of the binomial experiment. When the test gets performed, you have to have either a success or a failure. So there's really only two options. Then if you repeat the test, again, there's just a success or a failure. And then you repeat it again, success or a failure. And then you repeat it as many times as necessary as your experiment requires. The following is just an example of a binomial experiment. In this example, we're using drawing cards, and if we draw a card from a deck, we can call a success in this example drawing a heart, and then a failure would be if we draw anything other than a heart. Then we will have to place the card back into the deck and reshuffle and then draw another card and record whether it was a success or a failure. Put the card back in, reshuffle, and then continue the process, let's say, for this example, till we have done this 10 times. On the previous slide, we saw an example of something that is a definition of a binomial experiment, but what are the actual characteristics of a binomial experiment? And listed here, we have to say that the experiment has to have a fixed number of trials, meaning you have to, before you even begin, you have to state how many times you're going to repeat the experiment. Secondly, each of the trials has to be independent, meaning what you do in the first trial cannot have any effect on what you do in the second trial. Each trial has to have only two outcomes, either a success, you get what you wanted, or a failure, you did not. And finally, the probability of a success needs to be the same every trial. And so we can't have a different probability of getting, like in the card example, we put the card back so that every time there are 52 cards, so our probability stays the same. Now, some of the notation that you're going to need when doing problems over binomial experiments is you're going to have to understand that the number of trials is represented by the letter N, the probability of a success will be represented by the letter P, and the total number of successes that you want in that experiment is represented by a capital X. All right, and so since we remember from section 1, probability can't be negative, our successes has to be between 0 and n. So if we're going to repeat the experiment 10 times, then our successes has to come between 0 and 10. You can't go below 0 and you can't go above 10. So if we apply these rules and this notation to our card drawing example that we were looking earlier, where we were looking at the probability of drawing a heart being the success, we say each trial is we draw one card at a time. We decided that we were going to fix it to 10 times only, and so that would represent n is equal to 10. Each trial is independent because we are putting the card back every time. The previous draw has no influence on the next draw. Each trial will either have two outcomes. Success would be drawing a heart, and a failure would be anything other than a heart. And the probability of success is 0.25, all right, which makes P equal to 0.25. And remember, they get that number because there are 52 cards, 13 of them are hearts, and so 13 divided by 52 is equal to 0.25, and that's where the probability of success comes from. And we can say, once we know that P is 0.25, we can go through the number of successes. We could decide if we want to draw 2 successes out of 10, 3 successes out of 10, 0 successes out of 10, and remember, each time I say success, that means heart. Now remember this word success. All right, one thing we have to make sure that we understand is that success does not always mean good. Okay, success means that we get what we want. There's not a negative or a positive definition with the word success. It's just either you get what you want or you don't get what you want. So a success in the other example was drawing a heart, And so a failure would mean just not getting a heart. So don't always take the term success to mean good. Remember, success is you get what you are looking for or you get what you want. Now, this slide here is just to make you familiar with the formula that can be used to find the probability for a binomial experiment. And down here, you'll see that this right here represents a combination. This was something that was done in Chapter 5, which we did not cover. And remember, P, X, N comes from the N being the number of trials, X the successes, and P is the probability, and so forth. Now, this particular formula, all right, we're not going to actually memorize. All right, we are actually going to the calculator, and the calculator is going to go through and determine the answer to the probability for us, and then we'll do more examples in that in the next film.